Hey everybody, it's Scully. So I had something on my mind that I kind of wanted to discuss in today's video. And I wanted to start out with a general question first. So when there's situations arise, happen to people, and their initial first reaction is really blown out of proportion, you look back on it later and think, I didn't handle that the best. Seems kind of dramatic. That's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. So some people just naturally tend to be dramatic, and that can happen for a variety of reasons. The reason why I kind of wanted to discuss this topic is because even though it can manifest in a bad way, people can have toxic traits, and I mean, they can have reasons for happening, but obviously treating people badly is not cool, and that has to be dealt with at some point. But I did kind of want to cover some general reasons as to why people may either be dramatic or act dramatically, just really in general. Because there tends to be a lot of stigma behind it, and sometimes there can be more than what you initially think. Just if you're looking from an outsider's perspective, it may look one way, but there can actually be more to the picture. So, as I've discussed in previous videos, you have a rational brain and an emotional brain. Emotional brain acts first, usually. Rational brain is supposed to sort everything out, hopefully, before you act on something. And that's usually what I discuss people who have intrusive thoughts also, because those can be, this can be very bothersome to people. And if you're somebody who's very good about thinking about things before you act, you don't typically have a whole lot to worry about in the long run. Your brain, it plays tricks on you sometimes. We don't always know why, but it's just kind of one of those things. Silly human brain just doing its thing. And the brain's a poorly misunderstood organ in general. So yeah, sometimes when your emotional brain kind of takes over and your rational brain doesn't have time to really step in first, you can have really bad initial reactions to situations that you might look back on later and be embarrassed about. Well, people have also come from different backgrounds, different situations. You don't know what's going on in their life, what they've been going through. Sometimes people can have very displaced anger, meaning it's not appropriate to the situation, something that's very small they can completely lose their temper over. That could be a sign of somebody who's had a bad day, and maybe it looks like that was the situation that broke the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, but really it was actually in regards to something else, and that was just kind of, pouring gasoline on the fire, metaphorically speaking. So sometimes people can overreact to situations because they have displaced emotions over something else. But what I don't think people always think about is sometimes people can have feelings towards situations. They're perfectly valid, but they're just very amplified. Like somebody could say something that legitimately hurts your feelings. Okay, yeah, that happens sometimes. But if the person's reaction is a lot more distorted than what maybe normally would have happened in the situation, their feelings could still be valid, but they could be very amplified for various reasons. If you have somebody who's had a bad background, maybe they've had trauma in their life, sometimes maybe dramatic emotions can be a cry for help. It could be because they don't feel like that they're being heard. It's not uncommon for people, if their emotions are very amplified, very intense compared to what you would expect, it could be because somebody, if they're genuinely upset about something, they tried to address it and they got brushed off. Well, it's going to make anybody upset. Nobody wants to be told that it's all in their head, or that, oh, they're the problem, or it's not that big of a deal. No. No, those are very terrible things to tell somebody who's just genuinely upset. There's making a, what is it, a mountain out of a molehill, or whatever they call it. There's that, and then there's people who have valid feelings, but they're not being heard, they're being ignored, and that makes them very frustrated, that makes them very angry. So, they may go to the next person about the same problem, and their feelings may be very intense compared to how it was with the previous person because it wasn't addressed the first time. So, again, there can be people with bad habits, bad behaviors, people who genuinely aren't good for you that you don't want to be around. Okay, that's understandable. But then there can be people that have habits that stem from much deeper issues. Whether or not you're the kind of person that's going to step in and help them is perhaps another story. If they're your friend, of course, of course you're going to want to help. If there's some stranger, maybe a bit beyond your control, maybe you can help to some degree, maybe not. And ultimately, it's up to you either way. If you want to get involved in a situation like that, cool. If not, that's understandable. So, yeah, sometimes situations in life They're just much deeper than what you see. You may see a person overreacting, but what's really actually happening in the situation? What was that person going through before? Like, I mean, I kind of hate to use the example if you go somewhere like the store and somebody is throwing a fit about prices. Maybe that's not the greatest example, because obviously that behavior is not acceptable. And I would hope out in public, hopefully people would be, more polite, especially to workers and stuff, because it's not their fault. But there have been situations like that where, maybe they did have the worker that would come investigate the situation. Maybe the person was just actually upset about something else because maybe it was somebody who wanted to return an item and they were misinformed. They were told they could return it, then they couldn't. If it was a bad customer service situation, yeah, if they're upset, that's understandable. Now, if they're completely just going off just because, if they're just out for a pound of flesh, or if they're just trying to make somebody else's day terrible, then obviously that's a completely different situation. And obviously that's not the situation I'm referring to. So obviously this isn't some sort of statement about, letting people walk all over you or anything. It's just kind of just a matter of perspective, just what seems melodramatic to you, what may seem very blown out of proportion and distorted to you, may not feel that way to the other person. There are a lot of psychological things that people express, whether it's amplified emotions or things when they say one thing but they actually mean something else and people don't realize it right away. There are a lot of things that people do that have actual purposes, actual meanings, and sometimes they're just not very well understood until somebody digs deeper. Not everybody will take the time to dig deeper, which is understandable, but some people will, and they'll actually learn a lot from the situation. Because there's situations that happen all the time where it looks one way and it actually ends up being something much more. And that was kind of just the point I kind of wanted to make with this video. So, I mean, if people overreact to situations sometimes, also keep in mind that is normal to some degree because we are human. Humans have feelings, humans have emotions. They're not emotionless, they're not expressionless. People are emotional in nature, sometimes even when they don't want to be, because that just makes us human. And sometimes it can be a matter of if you did have a situation where maybe you felt like you were a little dramatic, you can be patient with yourself and realize, okay, I was just really upset. Maybe I didn't handle that the best, but in the future I can learn from that and I can try to do better. It's okay to let yourself have feelings. It's okay to let yourself express them. As we get older, as we experience life, we learn from things. We just learn to have better coping mechanisms for our feelings, things that are healthier so that we can have our feelings, but in healthier ways. So, until next time, have a great day.